First contact in the frozen wastes. The Antarctic wind howled across the research station's reinforced walls as Dr. Lyra Blackwood studied the unusual energy readings on her monitor. For 3 days, the sensors had detected an anomalous signature unlike anything she'd encountered in her 15 years of xenobiology research. The pattern pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm, beckoning from somewhere in the endless white expanse. "Dr. Blackwood, you need to see this." Marcus Reynolds, her research assistant, burst into the lab, his breath fogging in the cold air. "The satellite imagery just came through. There's something out there." Lyra followed Marcus to the communication center, where thermal imaging revealed a massive heat signature approximately 20 kilometers from the station. The object had melted a crater in the ice, its shape distinctly artificial. "Prep the all-terrain vehicle," Lyra ordered, already reaching for her extreme weather gear. And Marcus? Not a word to anyone outside the station. Not yet. Within an hour, they were cutting through the Antarctic night, their vehicle's powerful lights barely penetrating the swirling snow. The closer they got to the coordinates, the more their instruments went haywire, needles spinning wildly as if confused by what they were detecting. The crater appeared suddenly through the whiteout, a massive bowl of melted ice stretching nearly half a kilometer wide. At its center sat what could only be described as a ship, its crystalline hull refracting the vehicle's lights in impossible patterns. "My God," Marcus whispered, his words barely audible over the wind. Lyra's heart pounded as they approached the vessel. Its surface was unlike any material she'd ever encountered, seeming to shift between translucent and opaque depending on the angle of observation. But what caught her attention were the deep gouges along one side, as if something had tried to tear the ship apart. As they drew closer, a section of the hull suddenly became transparent, revealing movement within. Lyra grabbed her medical kit and stepped out into the bitter cold, ignoring Marcus's protests. She'd waited her entire career for a moment like this. The transparent section melted away as she approached, forming an entrance. The interior was surprisingly warm, illuminated by a soft, pulsing light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. But it was the sight before her that made her freeze in place. A being of living crystal lay wounded on the chamber floor, its translucent form marred by fractures and dark veins of damage. Around it coiled a massive creature that defied description, part serpent, part living metal, with scales that shifted like liquid mercury. The creature's eyes fixed on Lyra, glowing with an intelligence that sent shivers down her spine. The crystalline being, clearly female in form and unmistakably royal in bearing, reached out with a fractured arm. When she spoke, her voice resonated directly in Lyra's mind. "Help. Us." The guardian creature tensed, its mercury scale armor rippling, but made no move to attack. Instead, it shifted slightly, revealing more of its wounded queen. Lyra noticed how the creature's own form seemed to pulse in sync with the queen's weakening life signs. "I'm a doctor," Lyra said softly, taking a careful step forward. "I want to help, but I need to understand what happened to you." The queen's mental voice came again, weaker this time. "Pursued, across stars. Guardian, protected, but both damaged. Need sanctuary." Lyra glanced at the guardian creature, understanding dawning. This wasn't just a pet or a weapon, it was a symbiotic protector, bioengineered to safeguard its queen. And now both were injured and desperate. "Marcus," Lyra called out, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Get back to the station. We need to prep the research bay. And contact Dr. Rivera. We're going to need her expertise in crystalline structures." As Marcus hurried back to the vehicle, Lyra knelt beside the wounded queen, carefully examining the fractures in her crystalline form. The guardian's eyes tracked her every movement, but she sensed no hostility, only desperate concern for its charge. "I'm going to help you," Lyra promised, her breath visible in the cold air. "Both of you, but you'll have to trust me." The queen's response was faint but clear. "Trust," Earned. Guardian. Will allow. As if understanding, the mercury-scaled creature slowly unwound itself from around the queen, allowing Lyra closer access. Its liquid metal scales rippled with iridescent patterns, a language of light and color that Lyra somehow knew expressed both warning and hope. This was more than first contact. This was a moment that would reshape humanity's understanding of the cosmos. But for now, Lyra had a more immediate concern: saving the lives of two extraordinary beings who had crossed the stars only to crash land in Earth's most inhospitable region. As she began her preliminary examination, Lyra couldn't help but wonder what forces could be so terrible that they would drive a being of such power to seek refuge on a relatively primitive world. Whatever the answer, she had a feeling Earth's isolation in the galaxy was about to come to a dramatic end. Trust forged in crystal. The research station's medical bay had never been designed for anything like this. Dr. Lyra Blackwood watched as her team transformed the space, installing crystalline resonance equipment borrowed from the geology department alongside standard medical gear. The wounded queen lay on a specially constructed platform, her fractured form catching the light in ways that made the injuries look even more severe. The Guardian hadn't left the queen's side during the careful transport from the crash site. Now it coiled around the medical bay's perimeter, its mercury-scaled body flowing like liquid metal as it tracked every movement of the human medical team. Dr. Nadia Rivera, the station's crystalline materials expert, studied her readings with a furrowed brow. "The fractures are deepening," Nadia reported, her dark eyes fixed on the monitoring equipment. "Whatever caused this damage, it's still active at the molecular level, like some kind of crystalline virus." Lyra approached the queen, whose consciousness flickered like a weak flame. "Can you tell us what hit you? What caused this damage?" The queen's mental voice came as a whisper. "Shadow shatter weapons, designed to break our kind. Guardian, tried to shield, took damage too." Lyra turned her attention to the Guardian creature, noticing for the first time how its liquid metal scales seemed to stutter and freeze in places, as if the same weapon had disrupted its ability to shift forms smoothly. The creature's eyes met hers, and she felt a wave of mingled pain and determination. "Nadia," Lyra called, "we need to treat them both. Whatever this weapon is, it's affecting both crystalline and metallic structures. There has to be a common factor." As they worked, Lyra learned more about their unusual patients. The queen was part of a spacefaring race called the Lumini, beings of living crystal who had mastered the art of bioengineering guardians from raw elements. Each guardian was uniquely bonded to its queen, sharing a symbiotic connection that went beyond mere protection. "The bond. Sacred," the queen explained, her mental voice growing stronger as the initial treatments began to take effect. "Guardian is extension of self. Not servant, not weapon. Partner." The Guardian rumbled in agreement, its scales rippling with patterns of blue and silver. Lyra was beginning to understand these color shifts as a form of communication, though its full complexity still eluded her. Marcus burst into the medical bay, tablet in hand. "Dr. Blackwood, we got a problem." The satellite detected something entering Earth's atmosphere. Multiple objects, same energy signature as the Queen's ship. The Guardian's head snapped up, its form tensing as waves of dark red rippled across its scales. The Queen's mental voice carried an edge of fear. "They found us. The Shadowclave. They will not stop." Lyra made a quick decision. "Lock down the station. All non-essential personnel to the emergency bunkers. Nadia, we need to accelerate the treatment. How close are we to understanding the weapon's mechanism?" "Close," Nadia replied, fingers flying across her console. "The weapon seems to work by disrupting molecular bonds, causing cascading failures in both crystalline and metallic structures. But if we can stabilize these bonds..." She trailed off, lost in calculations. The Guardian suddenly moved, flowing across the room to one of the monitoring stations. Its scales shifted to form complex patterns that resembled mathematical equations. Lyra stared in amazement as she realized the creature was trying to communicate scientific information. "It's showing us how the weapon works," she breathed. "The Guardian understands the physics behind it. Nadia, can you translate these patterns?" Nadia was already recording and analyzing the Guardian's display. "This is incredible. The patterns aren't just showing us the weapon's effects, they're showing us how to reverse them." As they worked to implement the Guardian's solution, Lyra felt a growing sense of wonder. These beings weren't just refugees. They were members of an advanced civilization with knowledge that could revolutionize human understanding of physics and biology. Yet they had chosen Earth as their sanctuary, trusting humans with their survival. The Queen's mental voice interrupted her thoughts. "Trust, given carefully, watched your kind, before choosing, saw potential, compassion, innovation, things Shadowclave forgot long ago." Outside, the Antarctic storm intensified as if reflecting the approaching danger. Lyra knew they were running out of time. The treatment had to work, and quickly, or Earth's first contact with alien civilizations might also be its last. The Guardian's scales suddenly blazed with silver light as Nadia activated the modified treatment protocol. The Queen's crystalline form began to glow in response, the fractures slowly starting to seal. But even as hope began to rise, the station's alarms began to wail. The Shadowclave had arrived. Echoes of home. The research station shuddered as 3 Shadowclave vessels descended through the storm, their hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Dr. Lyra Blackwood watched the approaching ships on the monitoring screen, her mind racing through possibilities. Beside her, the Guardian's mercury scales rippled with patterns of deep purple and crimson, colors she now recognized as determination mixed with rage. "Tell me everything," Lyra said to the Queen, whose crystalline form had begun to stabilize under the new treatment protocol. "We need to know what we're facing." The Queen's mental voice had grown stronger, though the effort of communication still strained her. "Shadowclave were once like us, Lumini who rejected symbiosis, who saw Guardians as weapons to be controlled, not partners to be cherished. They developed ways to break both crystal and living metal, tried to force all Lumini to follow their path." The Guardian moved closer to its Queen, its scales forming intricate patterns that the Queen translated. "Guardian says they fear what they cannot dominate. Fear connection. Fear trust. So they seek to destroy it wherever found." Dr. Nadia Rivera burst into the medical bay, her usual calm demeanor shaken. "Multiple breaches in the outer perimeter. They're using some kind of phase technology to bypass our barriers." The Queen's form pulsed with alarm. "They will not stop. We'll destroy your facility, your people, to reach us." Lyra felt a surge of determination. "Not if we can help it. Nadia, how much of the treatment formula can we replicate quickly?" "Enough for a defensive measure, maybe, but we'd need a way to deliver it effectively." The Guardian's scales suddenly shifted to a brilliant silver, its form flowing into a more upright position. Complex mathematical patterns cascaded across its surface, drawing gasps from both scientists. "It's showing us how to weaponize the treatment," Lyra realized. "Turn their own technology against them." Through the Queen's translation, they learned that the Guardian had been analyzing the Shadowclave's weapons since their first encounter. The treatment they'd developed to heal the Queen could be modified to disrupt the phase technology the enemy used, forcing them to fight on equal terms. As they worked to implement the Guardian solution, the Queen shared more of their history. "Our world was once unified, peaceful, Guardians and Lumini living in harmony, advancing together. Then came the divide. Some believed Guardians should be stripped of consciousness, made into mere tools. Civil war followed. Those who became Shadowclave, they did terrible things, broke bonds between Guardian and Queen, corrupted the sacred trust." The station's lights flickered as another impact rocked the facility. Through the security feeds, they could see figures in dark armor materializing inside the outer corridors. Their movements were unnaturally smooth, as if they weren't fully bound by physical laws. "My Guardian," the Queen continued, her mental voice thick with emotion, chose to stay bonded even as others were broken, chose trust over subjugation. Together, we fled, seeking allies who might understand. Your world, your people, you still remember the importance of choice, of trust freely given. The guardian scales rippled with a pattern Lyra hadn't seen before, something between starlight and flowing water. The queen's crystalline form resonated in response, creating harmonics that made the air itself seem to sing. "They're communicating," Nadia whispered, checking her instruments. "The frequencies they're generating. They're not just communication. They're changing the physical properties of the space around them." Lyra watched in amazement as the Guardian's liquid metal form began to expand, its scales developing new patterns that seemed to bend light itself. The Queen's crystal structure pulsed in sync, each facet amplifying and redirecting the energy they were generating together. The bond between Guardian and Queen, Lyra realized, it's not just symbolic. It's a key to understanding physics we haven't even dreamed of yet. The Queen's response carried both pride and sadness. Why Shadowclave fear it so? Bond between different forms of life opens doors they cannot see, cannot control. But you understand seeking connection, even with those unlike yourself. A massive explosion rocked the facility, closer this time. The security feeds showed Shadowclave forces converging on their position, their armor seeming to drink in the light around them. The Guardian scales suddenly blazed with determination, forming patterns that needed no translation. It was ready to fight, to protect not just its queen now, but the humans who had helped them. The Queen's mental voice rang with clarity. Time to show them what trust can do. As Lyra and her team rushed to finish implementing the Guardian's defensive strategy, she understood that this was more than a battle for survival. It was a clash between two fundamentally different views of existence, one based on dominance and control, the other on mutual trust and cooperation. And Earth, for better or worse, had just chosen its side in a conflict that spanned the stars. Shadows descend. The first Shadowclave warrior materialized directly inside the medical bay, its armor seeming to draw the light from the room like a black hole. Dr. Lyra Blackwood barely had time to activate the modified defense field before the intruder unleashed a burst of energy that would have shattered both crystal and metal. Instead, the attack dissipated against an invisible barrier, the Guardian's equations proving true. The warrior staggered, its phase technology disrupted by the treatment-turned weapon. The Guardian struck with liquid metal precision, its mercury scales hardening into razor-sharp edges that sliced through the enemy's compromised armor. "The defense field works," Nadia shouted over the chaos, her fingers flying across the control panel. "But we can't maintain it over the entire facility." The Queen's mental voice rang with authority. "Focus field around core systems. Guardian and I will show Shadowclave cost of their choices." More warriors phased into existence, their dark armor absorbing ambient light. But now the Guardian was ready. Its liquid metal form flowed like quicksilver lightning, each strike precisely calculated to take advantage of the warrior's compromised defenses. The Queen, though still recovering, added her own crystalline powers to the battle, creating prismatic barriers that trapped and redirected enemy energy attacks. Lyra coordinated with the station's security team, using the Guardian's insights to modify their weapons. "Target the joints in their armor," she commanded through the comm system. The phase disruption makes them vulnerable there. The battle transformed the medical bay into a chaos of light and shadow. Shadowclave warriors moved with inhuman grace, but the Guardian matched them with fluid precision. Its scales shifted between offensive and defensive patterns, each movement a deadly dance of liquid metal. Through their bond, the Queen amplified the Guardian's abilities, their combined power creating effects that defied physics as humans understood it. Where Guardian and Queen worked in harmony, the Shadowclave fought as individuals, their tactics based on domination rather than cooperation. Their weakness, the Queen projected, her mental voice reaching all defenders, is their isolation. Each fights alone, Show them strength of unity. Understanding dawned on Lyra. Nadia, we can synchronize the defense field with their attacks. Everyone, time your strikes with the Guardians' movements. The strategy worked. Human weapons, coordinated with the Guardians' assaults and empowered by the Queen's crystal energy, began to turn the tide. Shadowclave warriors fell one by one, their superior technology undermined by their inability to adapt to cooperative tactics. But victory came with a price. The station's power systems strained under the burden of maintaining the defense field. Warnings flashed across control panels as generators approached critical levels. "We can't keep this up," Nadia warned, working frantically to reroute power. "The whole system's going to overload." The Guardian's scales suddenly blazed with a new pattern, complex mathematics that made Lyra's head spin. The Queen translated quickly, her mental voice urgent. "Guardian has solution. Can use station's geothermal tap. Channel Earth's power through our bond." "That much energy could kill you both," Lyra protested, understanding the risks from the equations flowing across the Guardian scales. The Queen's response carried both determination and trust. "Choice is everything. We choose this." Before Lyra could argue further, the remaining Shadowclave warriors launched a coordinated assault. Their dark armor seemed to ripple as they activated some final desperate weapon. The air itself began to crystallize, threatening to shatter everything and everyone in the medical bay. The Guardian moved with blinding speed, its liquid metal form enveloping the Queen in a protective embrace. Their combined forms began to pulse with energy drawn from deep beneath the Antarctic ice. The Guardian's scales transformed into patterns more complex than any Lyra had seen, while the Queen's crystalline structure resonated at frequencies that made reality itself seem to bend. "Nadia," Lyra shouted, "route all remaining power to their position." As human technology merged with alien power, the medical bay became a nexus of forces beyond human comprehension. The Guardian and Queen, their bond strengthened by trust and choice, channeled powers that the Shadowclave had forgotten in their quest for dominance. The resulting explosion of energy was like a miniature sun, but precisely controlled through the Guardian and Queen's combined will. When the light faded, the Shadowclave warriors were gone, their phase technology and dark armor reduced to inert fragments. The Guardian's liquid metal form flowed back into its natural shape, scales dimmed but still shifting in patterns of exhausted triumph. The Queen's crystal structure showed signs of strain but held strong, their shared trust having protected both from the backlash of their desperate gambit. As emergency systems struggled to restore normal power, Lyra approached the extraordinary pair. The Guardian's eyes met hers with what she could now recognize as respect, while the Queen's mental voice carried a warmth that transcended species. "Your people fought well," the Queen projected, "proved what we believed about humanity's potential." But even as they began to assess their victory, new alarms sounded throughout the facility. The main Shadowclave vessel was descending through the storm, its massive form dwarfing their previous opponents. The real battle, it seemed, was just beginning. Unity's dawn. The Shadowclave flagship hung in the storm-dark sky like a tear in reality, its hull drinking in light and hope alike. Inside the battered research station, Dr. Lyra Blackwood watched the massive ship's descent alongside the Guardian and Queen, all three knowing that their previous victory would mean nothing if they couldn't stop what was coming. "The ship carries their leader," the Queen's mental voice revealed, her crystal form still humming with residual energy from the previous battle. "The one who began the divide, who first broke the sacred bonds between Guardian and Queen." The Guardian's mercury scales rippled with ancient pain and renewed determination. Through their strengthened connection, the Queen translated its complex patterns. Guardian remembers, watched its kin stripped of consciousness, turned into mindless weapons, says we must end this cycle. Nadia rushed in, her tablet displaying critical data. "The flagship's energy signature is off the charts. Whatever they're powering up, it's bigger than anything we've seen." "They mean to end it," the Queen projected, weapon designed to shatter all bonds, everywhere, will destroy your world's very fabric. Lyra's mind raced through possibilities, like their previous weapon, but exponentially stronger, breaking molecular bonds on a planetary scale. Yes, they would rather destroy all than allow harmony between different forms of life. The Guardian scales suddenly blazed with complex equations, more intricate than any it had shared before. Nadia's eyes widened as she interpreted the patterns. It's showing us the weapon's fundamental frequency. If we could generate an opposing resonance, we would need more power than Earth's entire energy grid, Lyra said, but then paused, noting how the Guardian and Queen had moved closer together, their forms beginning to synchronize in a way she hadn't seen before. The Queen's mental voice carried both solemnity and hope. There is way. Ancient protocol, never attempted. Complete synthesis of Guardian and Queen, combining forms to channel power beyond normal limits. But, Lyra prompted, sensing the hesitation, process cannot be reversed. We would become something new. Neither Guardian nor Queen, but union of both, if successful, could generate resonance powerful enough. If not, you'll both be destroyed, Lyra finished. The Guardian's scales shifted in a pattern that needed no translation. Absolute certainty, complete trust in its Queen and their shared choice. Above, the Shadowclave flagship began charging its weapon, the very air becoming thin and brittle as molecular bonds throughout the atmosphere began to strain. They had minutes at most. We need to boost their power, Nadia said, already working at her console. Route everything we have into supporting their fusion. Lyra nodded, but her throat tight with emotion. She had come to see both beings as more than research subjects or even allies. They were friends who had shown humanity a better way of existence. There has to be another option. Choice matters, the Queen reminded her. We choose this. Trust in each other. Trust in you. The Guardian moved with liquid grace, its form beginning to flow around the Queen's crystalline structure. The Queen's facets started to pulse with inner light, resonating with frequencies that made Lyra's vision blur. Nadia, give them everything we've got, Lyra commanded. Divert all power to their position, and get everyone else to the bunkers. As emergency sirens wailed, and the station's crew evacuated, Lyra and Nadia worked frantically to support the extraordinary transformation taking place before them. The Guardian's liquid metal merged with the Queen's crystal matrix, their forms blending in ways that defied physics. The air itself seemed to sing with harmonics as two distinct beings chose to become one. The Shadowclave weapon reached full charge, its energy beginning to unravel the world's molecular bonds. But in that moment, the fusion completed. Where Guardian and Queen had been, a new entity arose, a being of living crystal and liquid metal, more beautiful and terrible than anything Lyra had ever seen. Its voice, when it came, was both mental and physical, resonating through reality itself. We are unity. We are choice. We are trust made manifest. The merged being rose through the station's roof as if physical barriers meant nothing, facing the Shadowclave flagship in the raging storm. As the enemy weapon fired, the unified entity generated a counter-frequency that turned the Antarctic sky into aurora of impossible colors. Two philosophies clashed in the darkness above Earth, one seeking to break all bonds, the other embodying the power of willing union. The Shadowclave weapon, for all its destructive force, couldn't overcome the strength of two beings who had chosen to trust completely, to become one not through domination, but through mutual choice. The flagship's weapon overloaded, its energy turning back upon itself. The massive ship began to break apart, its crew fleeing in emergency vessels. But rather than destroy them, the unified being projected a final message. Return to your people. Tell them what you witnessed. Show them there is another way. As the Shadowclave ships retreated into deep space, the crystal metal being descended to where Lyra and Nadia waited. Its form shifted between liquid and solid, beautiful and alien, and somehow still recognizable as their friends. You gave up everything, Lyra said softly. Gained everything, the being corrected. Through trust, through choice, through unity that respects difference. It turned its multifaceted gaze to the stars. Others will come, some seeking destruction, some seeking friendship. Earth must choose its path. And you? Nadia asked. What will you do now? Explore what we have become. Show others what trust can achieve. The being's form shimmed with patterns of hope and possibility. But we will return. Earth is now part of our story, as we are part of yours. As the unified being prepared to depart, it left humanity with both a gift and a challenge. Knowledge of what was possible when different forms of life chose to trust, to cooperate, to see strength in unity rather than domination. Dr. Lyra Blackwood watched her friends ascend into the clearing Antarctic sky, knowing that the universe had changed, not through force of arms or superior technology, but through the simple, profound power of trust and willing cooperation between different forms of life. The dawn broke over the horizon, painting the ice in colors that reminded her of the Guardian's shifting scales and the Queen's crystal facets. Somewhere out there, their combined form was exploring new possibilities, a living testament to what could be achieved when fear gave way to trust, when difference became strength, and when choice led to transformation. It was, Lyra realized, just the beginning.